Okay, alright. Add it up. Okay, alright. Add it up. Add it up.
Well, good morning. Good morning. Happy Monday for those of you that are tuning in. And I hope that you had a very, very good weekend. I did. Had a really good weekend. Celebrated with some family, a couple of birthdays. My mom's birthday was yesterday. My mother-in-law's birthday is today. So definitely a lot going on throughout the weekend. So I hope you guys had a great weekend as well. Just a couple of housekeeping rules like we always do. A couple of things we need to know about. So first things first, this class runs for about an hour. This little study class here, we do this for about an hour. Okay, so it is 7 o'clock. As you can see in the upper right hand corner, it is 7 o'clock Central Standard Time here in Chicago in our sunny little 60-degree weather today. And the second thing is, so we will work for 45 minutes. There is a counter in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen that will be going through keeping track of the time. We will take a break for about 5 minutes, stand up, get some coffee, get some water, and then we will get back to work for the last 5 minutes of the course and just kind of recap, make sure we have everything that we need. If there's anything that you want to know or questions that you have, you can put them inside of the chat of wherever you are watching, whether it is YouTube or you're on Twitter, wherever it is, you can put your questions there, and I will be happy to address them for you. So with that being said, let's go ahead. Let's get started. We are in the data governance, quality, and control section. Once we get done with this completely in the prep course, later this week, we will be working in the book. So we will actually be going through and studying directly from the book. This is to just prep us. So let's get started.
Ensures that the organization has accurate.
Let's
Earlier,
kind
I
of
summed up
restart
the
this at the
responsibilities of a
beginning.
data steward as taking care of the organization's data. Now that's a reasonable description of the role, but it's also pretty high level. What does it actually mean to take care of the organization's data? Well, data stewardship responsibilities may vary from organization to organization, but we can summarize them as fitting into 4 general categories: data quality, data security, data privacy, and regulatory compliance. Data quality ensures that the organization has accurate, relevant, and timely data to meet its business objectives. Managing data quality requires developing clear data definitions, monitoring data consistency, accuracy, and completeness, validating data quality on an ongoing basis, and promoting data reuse. We'll talk about each of these activities in the Maintaining Data Quality section of this course. Data security protects the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the organization's data. Data stewards have deep responsibilities for access control. They determine when the organization should enter into data use agreements with third parties, and they're responsible for granting release approvals to share information internally and externally. We'll cover common
That
confidentiality,
is my
integrity, and
Roomba
availability
running in the
controls
back,
in the
so I'm
Protecting
sorry you
Data
guys had to hear
Security
that
section
part,
of this
but
course.
that's what the noise was.
Data privacy ensures that the organization respects the rights and wishes of data subjects, the people whom they collect information about. Privacy and security are closely related, but they are separate disciplines. We'll discuss data privacy responsibilities and controls in the Preserving Individual Privacy section of this course. Finally, regulatory compliance ensures that the organization meets its legal obligations to protect data. Organizations are subject to a variety of laws and regulations depending upon the nature of the organization, the types of data that it collects, and the jurisdictions where it operates. Data stewards must understand these obligations and help ensure the organization's compliance. We'll cover some major regulations in the Regulatory Compliance section of this course. Now, no list of data stewardship responsibilities can be 100% complete. There isn't a universally agreed upon definition of the role, and the exact nature of a data steward's job will vary based upon organizational culture and needs.
Quiz early, first thing in the morning. Okay. What role in data governance programs is typically responsible for day-to-day oversight of data use? I'm going to go data processors. Then maybe it is data stewards. Okay. What category of data stewardship's work is focused on ensuring that the organization respects the wishes of that's the governance. Data privacy. Data stewards protect the organization from legal violations that may result in costly fines and negative publicity. We'll go true. Based off of the work that they do, what European law requires that organizations handling personal information designs a data protection designates a data protection officer? GDPR? What is not a characteristic of a good data steward? They don't necessarily have to be a technology expert.
Data management is a tricky issue for organizations of all sizes and across all industries. It's really challenging to maintain accurate and consistent data across a wide variety of business functions and then use that data to effectively achieve business value. To help understand these challenges, let's imagine the business of a large automobile manufacturer and think about the ways that manufacturer might collect information about different people. Of course, the manufacturer has customers who purchase their new cars. These customers come through vehicle dealerships in their local areas where they purchase cars, and the company receives information about those customers from the dealer, allowing them to track ownership of new vehicles. Now, those new car customers eventually sell their cars, and each vehicle may have one or more subsequent owners who purchased the car used. Those transactions may or may not be reported back to the manufacturer, who then might lose track of who owns one of their vehicles over time. Vehicle repair shops also interact with the manufacturer, providing information about customer repairs, ordering parts, and placing claims under vehicle warranties. As part of the repair process, they may feed information about customers back to the manufacturer. Now, the company also has a marketing team that purchases mailing lists of potential customers and sends out literature and other advertising targeting new car buyers who might be interested in their products. And some people are both employees of the manufacturer as well as customers, purchasing the products that their company produces. Each of these activities collects and generates data about customers, and if all of that data is stored in separate systems, it may become very difficult to maintain over time. If different systems have different data, the manufacturer may have no way of telling which information is accurate and which is incorrect or outdated. That's where Master Data Management, or MDM, comes into the picture. MDM is a data governance discipline that has the goal of maintaining a single source of truth for the most important data elements handled by the organization. This requires a combination of business processes and technology solutions that help keep systems aligned with this single source of truth and maintain the organization's master data. Now, organizations adopt MDM for a variety of reasons. In most cases, the organization begins to realize that its data is getting out of control, and they want to improve consistency across systems. Organizations may also want to streamline data access, and they realize that MDM can help them achieve that goal. Other organizations are driven to adopt MDM when they go through mergers and acquisitions that increase the scope of their business and have to quickly bring together data sources that need reconciliation. And other businesses are subject to policies and regulations that require them to handle data consistently. They're driven to MDM by their compliance obligations. Data quality begins with developing solid data definitions. We can't have consistent data in our organizations unless we have a shared understanding of the meaning of different terms that we use. Now, that might sound obvious and simple, but developing these definitions can be a very challenging and time-consuming task. You're likely to discover hidden data issues that you never thought of. Data definitions provide clear, concise descriptions of terms that are available to all stakeholders and then used throughout the organization. They might be for broad, important concepts such as revenue and profit, or for very specific, narrow niches such as the definition of a snap fastener. The nature and number of definitions that you'll need for your organization depends upon your business and your data needs. Together, the collection of data definitions developed by your organization form a data dictionary. This dictionary is a centralized reference available to business analysts, technologists, and other stakeholders to help them ensure that their work is aligned with the organization's master data definitions. Each definition should include some common elements: the term being defined, and a definition of the...
Probably write down this particular aspect of the data definition, like the data dictionary, because I think when we get ready to go into the book, I think that he will go into, I'm assuming it's going to be quite a bit of detail about this data dictionary, as that this is where the kind of the meat and potatoes for the organization and how they define their data is going to be. So I can see that being a really big thing. So I think we'll take note of that to make sure that for at least when we get to the book work later this week, then we'll start talking about, this chapter is probably at the end because this is data and governance. We have a lot of other stuff we have to learn before we get to data and governance.
Of that term in language understandable to business users. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the term has to be defined in plain English, as it may include some business-specific terminology, but it shouldn't use technical jargon. Anyone involved in the business should be able to pick up a definition and understand what it means. The definition may also include some technical details, such as the location of the single source of truth for the definition's master data. In some cases, it may include possible values for a term if the term is for a categorical data element, and the definition should also include the identity of the data owner or data steward for the term, as well as other stakeholders. It should also include the data classification, and it may include other notes and fields that are useful to the business. Here's a definition that I helped develop at a major university. It defines what it means to be an active student at this university. Now, as you can see in the definition, it reads, an active student is an individual who has been confirmed by an admitting office or other admitting authority as recorded by the university registrar, is considered an active student until he or she graduates, completes the academic term, withdraws or is dismissed, or fails to enroll for a term. Now that might sound complicated, but I assure you there's a good reason behind every single one of those words. The rest of the definition contains some of the other fields that we discussed, as well as notes on exceptions and specialized use cases. This is just one of the hundreds of data definitions used by the organization. As you develop data definitions, you'll want to work collaboratively with all of the stakeholders who might have input into the definition. Getting that input as you develop your definition helps avoid headaches later on if someone objects to the language that you chose. As your data dictionary grows, be careful to avoid overlapping definitions. You'll want to consolidate fields in cases where multiple data fields cover the same topic area. And
I'm
along
wondering
those
if
same
there's
lines,
somebody
you'll want
who
to
goes
standardize the
through
names used for
and
data fields if they differ
actually
across
make
business
sure
units.
that there is no overlapping.
Master
I wonder-
data management programs are also charged with maintaining the quality of the data in those single source of truth data stores. After all, if a master data store contains inaccurate information, that inaccurate information will then propagate to affect business processes all across the organization. We track data quality by evaluating it on 6 different dimensions. These include accuracy, completeness, consistency, timeliness, validity, and uniqueness. Now let's dive into each one of those. Data accuracy is what we'd often call the correctness of the data. In our master data stores, we want to make sure that our data accurately reflects the reality of the situation. For
Okay.
example, if we have customer telephone numbers in our database, the data is accurate if those numbers actually are the telephone numbers of our customers. Data completeness means that we have all of the relevant data for a field stored in our master data store. For example, if we have a listing of classes taken by a student, the data is only complete if our master data store includes all of the classes that that student actually took. Data consistency means that the data stored in multiple locations is the same. Master data management seeks to build a single source of truth in an effort to achieve data consistency. We want to reduce or eliminate duplicate data stores, and in cases where we need them, ensure that they're synchronized with the master data store. Data timeliness means that our data is current and not out of date. And once again, thinking about telephone numbers, our data is only timely if the telephone number listed in the database remains current. If the customer changes their telephone number and that change isn't reflected in the master data, it's no longer timely. Data validity means that the data meets our requirements and any attribute limitations. For example, a US zip code should be either 5 digits or 9 digits with a dash between the 5th and 6th digits. And data uniqueness means that we only have one record for each entity represented in a dataset. If the same customer has 2 different records, that introduces the possibility for error. When checking for data quality, consider the full data lifecycle and look for places where error might be introduced. This begins at data acquisition. Verify that the data source is reputable and that you're receiving high-quality data from that source. As you ingest data into your systems, it often goes through transformations to fit into your data stores, and it may pass through several systems on its way to the final destination. Make sure that this process doesn't mangle your data as it passes through different conversion steps. And you may also have other data manipulation operations that take place during your analysis as you summarize, aggregate, and transform your data. Finally, you present data on reports and dashboards. It's up to data stewards and others involved in the reporting process to make sure that this data is high quality and presented accurately.
All right, so there is a question before we keep going. There is a question about like what this is and where this training comes from. So this comes from LinkedIn Learning, and I forgot to do that in our housekeeping that we do in the beginning. So this is LinkedIn Learning, and we are learning directly from Mike Chapple, which wrote the book on this particular exam. This is the CompTiaDataplus DA0001 exam, which we will be taking in September. Some of us in the group, some are taking it in June, but we are taking our test in September. And we are on the data governance side. So this, if you are a veteran, this is a free service for you. If you need to know how to get LinkedIn Learning where you don't have to pay for it, this is part of LinkedIn's premium service, which they give to veterans free. So if you did not know that, you can write to me inside of the chat. I will be happy to help you to get that if you are a veteran, because they will go through your LinkedIn page to verify that you are a veteran. If you need help with that and how to add that to your LinkedIn page, I'll be happy to help you. I've done it for a couple of years. So I'll be happy to assist you with getting that set up on your LinkedIn page. But let's get back to the rest of the course.
Let's dig a little deeper into one of the dimensions of data quality, data validity. Data governance programs should perform regular data quality validation, both when bringing new data into the organization and on an ongoing basis. This helps ensure that data remains valid and healthy and it's ready to provide business value. Some of the techniques that we use to validate data quality may be automated and perform when bringing new data into a system. If we're
Correct.
loading a data file, we can confirm that the data fields we're loading match our data type requirements. For example, in the last video, I used zip codes as an example of a data field that might have validation requirements. If I'm loading a dataset and I have a requirement that my database should contain 9-digit zip codes, and we encounter a record that has only 5 digits or it contains alphabetic characters, that's a data validation failure. Similarly, we can compare the number of data points in our source system and the number of data points loaded into our master data store. If we import a transaction log that contains 10,000 records, but only wind up adding 9,500 to our system, something has likely gone wrong. Now, those were just a couple of examples of the types of data quality checks that we might perform. Each of the checks we perform should have associated metrics that allow us to keep track of its status. When we're checking data types, we can track the number of rows that conform to requirements, and then report metrics for the percentage of conforming rows and the percentage of non-conforming rows. Similarly, when we're checking other data validation requirements, we can track the number of rows that pass validity checks and the number of rows that fail those checks. Once we have these metrics, we need to know what we're going to do with them, though. Will we allow the partial importing of datasets that have rows that fail to meet validity requirements?
Absolutely
We
not.
may choose to go ahead and import only the passing rows, or we may choose to reject the entire dataset. That's a business decision that must be made by data stewards in the context of the specific situation. We can also use non-automated methods to check data validity. It's usually not reasonable to check every single record that we bring into our master data stores by hand, but we do have some options available to us. We can sample our dataset to perform spot checks or data audits on a small proportion of rows. If we find errors, that may trigger a deeper investigation of the entire dataset. We can also cross-validate new data with data that already exists in our system or other systems, and flag cases where we have apparent inconsistencies. Human beings can also apply judgment to our data and use a set of reasonable expectations to identify outlier values. For example, if we have a customer record where the age of a living customer is listed as 150 years old, that defies reasonable expectations and it merits investigation. Finally, we can perform data profiling to help us get a better sense of the normal parameters of our dataset, and then use those profiles to help identify outliers in a more automated fashion.
All right. We have a quiz, of course. Okay, which dimensions of data quality insurance that data stored in multiple locations is the same? I am going to go consistency because validity is making sure the particular data set that you have is valid. For example, if you're looking for census results, you wouldn't be looking for the number of people that live inside of Texas, specifically in, you're looking for the detail of the whole entire state as opposed to a specific city, for example. Accuracy would be to make sure that your data is accurate. For example, he gave the one with if you saw a person who has a age of 150 years old, that would warrant, obviously that wouldn't be very accurate, so you would have to investigate that. Completeness would be to make sure that your data has all of the contents that you need in order to make your particular decision, whatever that decision will be, the business decision. Data validation should occur only when data is initially brought into an organization. I disagree with that. I think that it should be a consistent thing. So I do think we should look at what effort has the goal of maintaining a single source of truth. Oh my goodness, this is that MDM. Data definitions should be written in plain English. That's true.
Information security professionals have broad and important responsibilities for safeguarding the information and systems that
Confidentiality.
are often an organization's most valuable assets. When we think of the goals of information security, we often use a
Of
model known as the
course.
CIA triad shown here. It highlights the three most important functions that information security performs in an enterprise: confidentiality, integrity, and
And
availability.
availability.
Each of these is crucial to a strong data stewardship program. Confidentiality ensures that only authorized individuals have access to information and resources. This is what most people think of when they think about information security, keeping secrets away from prying eyes, and it is in fact how cybersecurity professionals spend the majority of their time. Malicious individuals seeking to undermine confidentiality are said to engage in disclosure, making sensitive information available to individuals or the general public without the owner's consent. Cybersecurity professionals are also responsible for protecting the integrity of an organization's information.
So
This
for
means that
those
there
of
aren't
you
any unauthorized
who
changes to that data.
for those of you guys who know, that was what my major was in school initially. Up until about 2 weeks ago, I switched from cybersecurity to data analytics. So the reason why I'm laughing is because one of our lessons we had in class was going over that specific triad. So it's like one of the parts that I failed in the class was the confidentiality part. That's why I laughed at the triad, because I had to go and learn specifically what the confidentiality aspect of cybersecurity had to do with.
And this goal is closely linked to the data stewardship goal of data quality. Unauthorized changes may come in the form of a hacker seeking to intentionally alter information, or a service disruption accidentally affecting data stored in a system. In either case, it's the cybersecurity professional's responsibility to prevent these lapses in integrity, and data stewards must work closely with those cybersecurity professionals to achieve the goals of their data governance programs. The final goal of cybersecurity is availability, ensuring that authorized individuals are able to gain access to information when they need it. If users can't access important business records or systems, that lack of availability may have a profound impact on the business. Malicious individuals seeking to undermine availability engage in attacks known as denial of service attacks. These attacks try to either overwhelm a system or cause it to crash, denying legitimate users the access that they need. Each cybersecurity control that we implement is aligned with at least one of the three key objectives of cybersecurity: confidentiality, integrity, or availability. Let's take a look at some of the controls that security professionals use to enhance confidentiality. One way that we protect the confidentiality of information is preventing people from accessing sensitive information in the first place. Access controls are the primary mechanism for restricting people from seeing data that they shouldn't see. Access controls protect confidentiality by limiting users to accessing only those files and other stored data where they have been granted permission. In the world of access controls, cybersecurity professionals are often responsible for designing those controls, while data stewards may be responsible for actually granting and administering user access. Encryption
Didn't
is
know that.
also an important security control for enforcing confidentiality. Attackers may try to steal information without going through normal channels. For example, they might attempt to eavesdrop on network communications or remove data from a hard drive by bypassing the operating system and its access controls. Encryption uses mathematical algorithms to transform plain text into ciphertext that is then unintelligible to anyone who doesn't have access to the appropriate decryption key.
Yes,
Encryption plays an
decryption
important role in
keys.
protecting data in two different environments. First, encryption protects data at rest. That's what cybersecurity professionals call data that's stored on some sort of media or system. Data at rest might be on a local hard drive, on a server's shared drive, or in a cloud service. Encrypting this data protects it from unauthorized access by requiring that decryption key for a user to gain access to the information. The second data environment is data in motion. That's what cybersecurity professionals call data that's being transmitted over a public or private network. When data is sent over a network, it's subject to eavesdropping by an attacker who has access to that wired or wireless network. Adding encryption to data before transmission protects it from this type of eavesdropping. Information can also be hidden in plain sight to protect it. Steganography is a technique that hides information inside of other files by subtly manipulating the contents of that file. For example, steganography may be used to embed a secret message within an image file that is undetectable to the naked eye. As data stewards, one of the most important things that we do is ensure that only authorized individuals gain access to information, systems, and networks under our protection. The access
Hence the
control
reason why
process
we have
consists of
two-step
three steps that you
authentication.
need to understand. These steps are identification, authentication, and authorization. During the first step of the process, identification, an individual makes a claim about their identity. The person trying to gain access doesn't present any proof at this point, they simply make an assertion. It's important to remember that the identification step is only a claim, and the user could certainly be making a false claim. Imagine a physical world scenario where you want to enter a secure office building where you have an appointment. During the identification step of the process, you might walk up to the security desk and say, "Hi, I'm Mike Chapple." Now, proof comes into play during the second step of the process, authentication. During the authentication step, the individual proves their identity to the satisfaction of the access control system. In our office building example, the guard would probably want to see my driver's license to confirm my identity. Now, just proving your identity isn't enough to gain access to a system. The access control system also needs to be satisfied that you are allowed to access the system. That's the third step of the access control process, authorization. In our office building example, the security guard might check a list of that day's appointments to see if it includes my name. Now, when you get ready for the exam, it's very important that you remember the distinction between the identification, authentication, and authorization phases. So far, we've talked about identification, authentication, and authorization in the context of gaining access to a building. Let's talk about how they work in the digital world. When we go to log into a system, we most often identify ourselves using a username, probably composed of some combination of the letters from our name. When we reach the authentication phase, we're commonly asked to enter a password. Now, there are many other ways to authenticate, including very strong authentication mechanisms, but those are beyond the scope of this course. What you need to know is that authentication is proving your identity. Finally, in the digital world, authorization often takes the form of access control lists that itemize the specific file system permissions granted to an individual user or group of users. Users proceed through the identification, authentication, and authorization processes when they request access to a resource. In addition to this process, access control systems also provide accounting functionality that allows administrators to track user activity and reconstruct it from logs. Together, the activities of authentication, authorization, and accounting are commonly described as AAA. As you design access management programs, you'll need to think about the mechanisms that you use to perform each of these tasks. You'll also want to consider the environments supported by identity and access management mechanisms. In a modern computing environment where organizations combine resources from both cloud and on-premises systems, you'll want an identity and access management program that can work across both environments. Discretionary Access Control Systems, or DAC systems, offer a flexible approach to authorization, allowing users to assign access permissions to other users. The owners of files, computers, and other resources have the discretion to configure permissions as they see fit. Discretionary access control systems are the most common form of access control because they provide organizations with much-needed flexibility. Imagine if users in your organization didn't have the ability to assign file rights to other users as needed, and IT had to be involved in every request. Now that would certainly make life difficult, wouldn't it? Let's take a look at an example of a discretionary access control system. Imagine that we have a file containing information on some of the organization's employees. Alice, an analyst within Human Resources, created this file, and the operating system recognizes her as the file owner. Alice, however, created this file at Bob's request, and she wants Bob to have permission to do everything that she can do, so Alice gives Bob full control permission over that file. Alice also knows that Carol needs to occasionally make updates to the file, so she assigns Carol read and write permission. Bob wants his boss, Tracy, to be able to look at the file as well, but he doesn't want Tracy to make modifications to the file.
Oh, read only.
Since Bob has full control of the file, he can also set permissions for other users, so he goes ahead and grants Tracy permission. Tracy and Carol can't modify these file permissions because they're not the file owners and they don't have full control over the file. This is a great example of a discretionary access control system. In this case, Alice and Bob both have the discretion to change the permissions on the file as they see fit. In a
Okay.
mandatory access control scenario, on the other hand, Alice and Bob would not have the ability to grant other users access to the file. Permissions would be set by the operating system based upon the file's classification. The NTFS file system access control model used on Windows disks is one of the most common examples of a discretionary access control system. It allows users who own a file to assign each other various permissions.
All right, here's our quiz, which I knew was coming up soon enough. All right, what cybersecurity goal protects an organization's data from unauthorized modification? Then it's got to be integrity then. Okay, so it was integrity. I originally chose confidentiality. What is an example of data in transit? That is the like what's in the on networks. I'm gonna go on networks. What is the final stage of the data life cycle? I guess destroy? Yeah, I'm like, wait, that was from a ways away. I remember that's from a different class, but I don't remember him going through the end of the data lifecycle. Maybe he did and I didn't remember it, but
Data privacy is one of the key pillars of data governance, and data owners and stewards must act to protect the privacy of personal information entrusted to their care. This requires a strong understanding of the principles of data privacy, as well as the willingness and ability to enforce those principles wherever data is collected, stored, processed, and transmitted by the organization. As an organization establishes its privacy program, it should begin by documenting a privacy policy. This is an external-facing document that explains the organization's privacy practices to data subjects and other stakeholders. The privacy policy is normally published on an organization's website, and it's written through a collaboration of privacy professionals and attorneys to ensure that it satisfies any legal obligations the organization may have. The organization should also develop an acceptable use policy. This policy is an internal policy that sets expectations for how the organization will handle data and explains privacy responsibilities to employees who will handle personally identifiable information. Now, with those building blocks in place, the organization may move forward and build out the mechanisms required to implement a privacy program. We'll talk more about the privacy principles that the program should enforce in the next video, but you'll need some systems in place to implement those principles. For example, you'll need procedures for distributing privacy notices to data subjects, mechanisms for tracking user preferences, including opt-ins and opt-outs, and logging and auditing facilities that provide accountability for user actions when handling personally identifiable information. All of the stakeholders in a data governance program bear responsibility for protecting the privacy of personal information under their care throughout the information lifecycle. Now, this private information may come in many forms. Two of the most common elements of private information are personally identifiable information, or PII, and protected health information, or PHI. PII includes all information that can be tied back to a specific individual,
addresses,
while PHI includes healthcare records that are regulated under the Health Insurance
names,
Portability
date of birth,
and Accountability Act,
medical
HIPAA.
conditions.
The Generally Accepted Privacy Principles, or GAAP, are 10 components of data privacy that can be used to help organizations design their own privacy programs. The GAAP principles were developed through a collaboration between 4 major industry organizations: the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, the Canadian Institute of Chartered Accountants, the Information Systems Audit and Control Association, and the Institute of Internal Auditors. The first of the 10 GAAP principles is management. This principle states that an organization handling private information should have policies, procedures, and governance structures in place to protect privacy. For example, the organization should clearly define the roles of data owner, data steward, and data custodian. The second gap principle is notice. Anyone who is the subject of records maintained by the organization should receive notice of that fact, as well as access to the privacy policies and procedures followed by the organization. This is
One thing
often
I want
accomplished.
to talk about with this is I used to work for a company, and it was very blurred lines as to when a customer's information was taken, and as that information, like the customer receiving notification that their information was being stored. Now that I look at this, I recall a customer asking me about how their information was being stored, and I just referenced the call off to another person. But now I'm thinking about knowing this part that goes with the information that you're giving out. Are you receiving notice of how that information is being stored? Like you create an account online or something to that nature. How is that being stored? And are you receiving a notice that how that information is going to be stored? So, or destroyed or used or sold or whatever it's going to be.
Through the terms of agreement for a website and a formal privacy notice. The third gap principle is choice and consent. The organization should inform data subjects of their options regarding the data they own and get consent from those individuals for the collection, storage, use, and sharing of that information. The fourth gap principle is collection. The organization should only collect personal information for purposes disclosed in their privacy notice.
This actually begs a question of if the organization should only collect personal information for the purpose disclosed in their privacy notices. However, if they don't have privacy notifications, so they don't even have a privacy plan in place, then as far as the collection is concerned, um, it's just interesting now learning this part, knowing like, oh, we don't really pay attention to that a lot. And when we give out information, maybe that's something that maybe just I do. I'm not assuming for you guys, but I know for me, sometimes I'm not very aware of the information that I give out. I'm like, I'm trying to get to a goal, whatever I need to do to get to that goal, but not paying attention to where is the data and the information that I'm creating for that account, or credit card, or car purchase or home purchase, whatever. Where is that information going to be stored, and do I have a right to request that information from the owner?
The fifth principle is use, retention, and disposal. When the organization collects personal information, it should only use it for disclosed purposes and not use it for other reasons just because they already have the data. Additionally, the organization should dispose of the data securely as soon as it is no longer needed for the disclosed purpose.
That's interesting as well, because when our information is given, let's say, and just heads up, this is your less than 5 minute warning. We are going to go on the break here in less than 5 minutes, so just be prepared for that part. But we also want to look at if a company is getting rid of our information because for whatever reason they collected it to set up an account and to verify that we are an actual human, then if they're getting rid of it, they then need to let us know that they're getting rid of it. I know some places, I've received quite a few places where every time they update their privacy policy, for example, every time Google updates its privacy policy, or Twitter for that matter, you get a notification. Now, you may not pay attention to it and you may delete it, but they do let you know when the privacy policy is new. In some cases, places will actually make you read the privacy policy before you even can move forward in the app. I know Instagram is that way when they did their update recently for their privacy. I know a lot of us probably didn't pay attention to it, me included, but now going forward with the information that I'm learning here, I can be more aware of how my information is being used. And I think that's something that we as data heads really have to work really hard at making sure we educate ourselves, because as we move along in our careers, I can see people coming to us asking questions about like this, like data and how it should be. But there's a whole entire document that goes through these particular things that he's going through, all 10 of them.
The sixth gap principle is access. Organizations should provide data subjects with the ability to review and update their personal information. The seventh gap principle surrounds disclosure to third parties. The organization should only share information with third parties if that sharing is consistent with the purposes disclosed in privacy notices and they have the consent of the individual to share that information. The eighth gap principle is security. The organization must secure private information against unauthorized access. The ninth gap principle is quality. The organization should take reasonable steps to ensure that the private information they maintain is accurate, complete, and relevant. And finally, the 10th gap principle is monitoring and enforcement. The organization should have a program in place to monitor compliance with its privacy policies and provide a dispute resolution mechanism. Each of these 10 gap principles plays an important role in developing a comprehensive information privacy program. Data owners should ensure that they are followed for each element of personal information under their control. If you're looking for more detailed control objectives, the International Organization for Standardization offers ISO standard 27018. This standard provides a code of practice for the protection of personally identifiable information in public cloud environments. Organizations developing and monitoring their privacy programs should conduct regular privacy impact assessments
This was during
to
the time
identify
of
the
COVID.
privacy ramifications of their business operations. One way that many organizations seek to protect themselves against accidental disclosures of personal information is to remove all identifying information from datasets before placing them in the cloud or with another service provider. De-identification is the process of moving through a dataset and removing data that may be individually identified.
So we're in less than a minute for your break.
Names,
So
social
what I will
security
do
numbers,
is
and
we'll
other
finish up
obvious
kind of this
identifiers.
until
However,
it goes to
simple
break.
data
But
de-identification
please
is
get
often
up, walk
insufficient to
around,
completely
get you some
safeguard
water or so,
information.
so we can get
The
done
reason for
with
this is that you can often
this
combine
coursework.
seemingly innocuous fields to uniquely identify an individual. A study done at Carnegie Mellon University analyzed 3 fields commonly retained in de-identified datasets: zip codes, dates of birth, and gender. Now, you wouldn't think that any one of these fields used alone would allow you to identify someone. After all, a lot of people live in the same town as me, and there are a lot of people on the planet who were born the same day I was born. However, the danger comes when you combine all 3 elements. The Carnegie Mellon study found that these 3 elements together uniquely identify 87% of people in the United States. So while there may indeed be many people in
Well, welcome back. I hope that you enjoyed your break. We have about 5 minutes left, so we will finish up the rest of this one and do our recap.
In my town, and many people born on the same day as me in the world, there's an 87% chance that I am the only male in my town born on my birthday. What this means for us is that we need to be much more careful with protecting data than simply removing obvious identifiers. Instead of just de-identifying data, we want to anonymize our data, making it almost impossible for someone to figure out the identity of an individual person. The HIPAA
Anonymizing.
standards include a rigorous process for anonymizing data that's widely accepted in the analytics community. It offers two pathways to clearing a dataset. First, you can have statisticians analyze your dataset and validate that it would be very unlikely that it could disclose the identity of an individual. This pathway requires access to professional statisticians, and it does include the possibility of an accidental disclosure. Alternatively, you can opt to use the safe harbor approach that requires eliminating 18 data elements from your dataset that might be combined with each other to reveal an individual's identity. I won't read you this whole list, but you're welcome to peruse it on the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services website. It includes things like social security numbers and email addresses, as well as date of birth and zip code. Whichever method you use for data de-identification and anonymization, make sure that you've thought through this issue carefully and that you're taking appropriate steps to protect the privacy of your data subjects. Now, of course, the best approach to minimizing your risk is to minimize the data that you have in the first place. If you're able to destroy data completely, there's no need to worry about de-identification or anonymization. An alternative to removing data from a dataset is transforming it into a format where the original information can't be retrieved. This is a process called data obfuscation, and we have several tools at our disposal to assist us. First, we can use a hash function to transform a value in our dataset to a hashed value. Now remember from our discussion of hash functions that they're one-way functions. If we apply a strong hash function to a data element, we may replace the value in our file with the hashed value. While it isn't possible to retrieve the original value directly from the hashed value, there is one possible flaw to this approach. If someone has a list of all possible values for a field, they can conduct something called a rainbow table attack. In this attack, the attacker computes the hashes of those candidate values and then checks to see if those hashes exist in the data file. Let's say that we had a file listing all of the students at a college who have failed courses, but we hash their student IDs. If an attacker has a list of all students, they can compute the hash values of all student IDs and then check to see which hash values are on the list. For this reason, hashing should be used with caution. A related approach is tokenization. In tokenization, sensitive values are replaced with a unique identifier using a lookup table. For example, we might replace a widely known value, such as a student ID, with a randomly generated 10-digit number. We then maintain a lookup table that allows us to convert those back to student IDs if we need to determine someone's identity.
Well, you
Now,
can
of
do
course,
that
if you use this
digitally,
approach,
too.
you
Create
need to
a
keep the
token and
lookup
then-
table secure. Because this tokenization is reversible, it's often referred to as a pseudonymization technique. Finally, in many cases, we simply don't need to re-identify data. If that's the case, you can redact the data from the file using an approach known as masking. This simply replaces the sensitive information with blanks. For example, we might replace all of the digits of a social security number with X's.
All right, now we got a quiz and less than a minute to do it. All right, so you know what we'll do? We'll leave this quiz for the next time that we meet, since we don't have that much time left together. We meet on Wednesday, so don't worry about doing this test for today. We'll do this test again on Wednesday, and I guess we'll get started right here, kind of starting off with the test and hopefully remember what it is we went through. All right, so like I said, we're less than a minute here, so I appreciate you guys hanging out with me today. Enjoy the rest of your week. I will see you on Wednesday morning. We will pick up on this quiz and kind of take it from there. And if you guys want to go ahead, that's up to you, but we will start here as far as our information, and I'll see you guys on Wednesday.